Second, Emperor passed a very restless night. He had abundant clammy perspirations over the head, the spine, the breast, and the upper extremities, dry and frequent coughing. At 9 a.m., I introduced Dr. Arnott to the Emperor, who put several questions to him relative to his disease, complaining of pains in the stomach and the abdomen. The English physician proposed animal foods such as gelatinous or other similar substances, the choice of which must be subordinate to the state of the digestive powers. He further advised that the patient should remain in bed as little as possible and should use pills of extract of socotrine aloes, 12 pills to be made and 2 to be taken in the morning and 2 at night. The emperor manifested extreme repugnance to all medicines, particularly in a liquid state. 11 a.m., abundant clammy perspirations, fever considerably diminished. 3 p.m., continuation of the perspiration, the swelling of the abdomen increased every moment. At 4:45, a new exacerbation of fever occurred, accompanied by icy coldness, particularly at the lower extremities. At 7, some of the servants brought in a report that they had seen a comet towards the east. A comet? Exclaimed Napoleon with emotion. That was the sign, precursor of the death of Caesar. I came in the midst of the agitation into which this report had thrown him. You've seen, Doctor? No, sire, nothing. How so, the comet? There's no comet to be seen. It has been observed. That is a mistake. I have looked at the sky for a length of time without being able to discover anything of the kind. Labor lost, Doctor. I'm at the end of my career. Everything tells me so. You alone persist in concealing the fact from me. But to what purpose? Why should I deceive myself? I am, however, wrong to complain. You are attached to me and wish to save me the agony of knowing my fate. I feel grateful for your intention. Third, the patient passed a tolerable night and slept a great deal. At 6 in the morning, enema followed by an abundant evacuation of pituitous matters. As I was coming from the emperor, I met Thomas Reed. He was impatient and uneasy and anxious to see Napoleon inhabit the new house. He spoke to me about it, expressing his surprise that I should allow him to remain and be stifled in ill-ventilated and unwholesome rooms, while we could dispose of magnificent apartments. I understand, said I. Murdered in a hovel? He must expire in a palace. The combination is too British. I cannot lead myself to it. Try elsewhere. He did so. I had scarcely brought Dr. Arnott to the emperor's bedside when he began to descant upon the advantages of moving. Napoleon listened to him without answering a word, and after a few minutes' consideration, he turned to me. Is that your opinion, Doctor? No, sire, the fever is too violent. The removal from one house to another might be attended with the most serious consequences. You have heard, said he to Arnott. We must think no more about it. The doctor endeavored to take up the conversation again, but the emperor turned a deaf ear and the subject was dropped. The emperor was plunged in a deep melancholy, pulse sweet, quick, and irregular, pulsations varying from 74 to 80 per minute. Heat of the body, 96 degrees Fahrenheit. The emperor appeared to me to be in imminent danger, and I communicated my fears to Dr. Arnott, who, far from having the same feeling, augured very favorably of his state. I should have wished to entertain the same hopes, but I could not conceal from myself that Napoleon was drawing near his end. I stated this conviction to Counts Bertrand and Montholon, and the latter took upon himself to inform the emperor that his hour was approaching and to engage him to settle his affairs. Fourth, the fever continued the whole night with alternations of heat and cold, particularly the lower extremities. His imagination was disturbed by nightmares and frightful dreams. At 8 a.m., the emperor was rather better, but his pulse was at 84 and the heat of his body was above the natural degree. The patient drank a great deal of water colored with claret. At 10 a.m., new exacerbations of fever accompanied by coldness of the lower extremities, painful heaviness in the head. 1 p.m., paroxysm accompanied by nausea and clarous vomitings, which after violent efforts were renewed at 2 o'clock in greater abundance and thicker substances. The 5th, the emperor passed a night of extreme agitation. He had 4 successive vomitings. They had not ceased for a single minute. Napoleon was quite overpowered by his sufferings and exclaimed several times, since I was to lose my life in this deplorable manner, why did the cannonballs spare it? At 10 a.m., slight exacerbation of fever. The patient was a little better, but extremely weak, complaining a great deal of pain in the stomach and taking scarcely any food. At 4 p.m., nausea and vomiting of glarous matters. At 6 p.m., the patient took a pill composed of extract of socotrine, aloes, and soap. It left an unpleasant taste in the mouth, which remained the whole evening and part of the night. Fit of fever. At 10, diminution of fever followed by abundant viscous perspiration. 6th, the night was not unfavorable. The pill, however, produced no effect, and the fever returned with increased violence. The patient's rest was frequently interrupted by parching thirst. He called every moment for something to drink without being able to quench it. At noon, the emperor had fallen into a kind of drowsiness. He persisted in refusing to take any food. I begged him to refresh his mouth with something. Let me alone, doctor. Do not disturb the repose I now enjoy. 1 p.m. The emperor took 2 purgative pills. We proposed the use of cordials, particularly decoction of bark. Exacerbation of fever accompanied with icy coldness at the lower extremities, headache, pain in the liver. The purgative pills produced at last an abundant evacuation of bilious mucus and glarous matter. It was now about 20 days since the emperor had been able to shave, and he had allowed his beard to grow to such a pitch that it was quite troublesome. I had often endeavored to persuade him to order one of his servants to shave him, but he had always eluded the subject. At last, however, the inconvenience to him became so intolerable that he expressed a wish to be shaved. I proposed to him to send for Curceau or some other of his suite. He had first made no reply, pondered a few minutes, and then said, I've always shaved myself. Nobody has ever put his hand upon my face. I'm now without strength, and must of necessity resign and submit to that against which my nature has always revolted. But no, doctor, added he, turning towards me, it shall not be said that I have thus suffered myself to be touched. It is only you that I will allow to shave me. I had never shaved but my own beard. I therefore pleaded my inexperience and tried every effort to induce the emperor to employ a more skillful hand. Very well, it shall be as you like, but certainly no one but yourself shall ever boast of having put his hands on my face. I shall see, however. 7th, the patient passed the night in a state of incessant agitation. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the fever began to decrease after some abundant, partial viscous perspirations. Pulse low, quick, and irregular. 3 p.m. The emperor was in tolerably good spirits and took it for a spoonful of jelly and a roasted apple. At 5, the emperor rose, shaved, and dressed. Well, doctor, not this time yet. I told you, sire, that your hour was not yet arrived. I drew his armchair near him. He sat down, as to the newspapers, and was perusing them with a certain degree of satisfaction when he met with I know not what offensive anecdote respecting 2 of his generals, which was said to have been related by one of us. His countenance assumed an expression of severity. His eyes became sparkling. It is you, sir, who circulate such infamous anecdotes, and it is in my name that you relate them. What induces you, what prompts you to act in that way? What is your object? Is it to represent me as keeping a school of defamation that you have followed me here? What? It is I who degrade and dishonor my friends, my partisans, those who have attached themselves to my fortune. Wherefore do you tarry? What detains you? Hasten to Europe. You will write letters from the Cape or from the Mediterranean or some other place, for there is no difficulty in framing a libel. The emigrants will applaud. I shall not be there to contradict your assertions, and you will enjoy your falsehood. Go! The individual, thus admonished, withdrew. Napoleon continued, no doubt faults were committed, but who is exempt from faults? The citizen, in the quiet tenor of his easy life, has his moments of weakness and strength, and it is required that men grown old in the midst of the hazards of war, who have constantly had to contend with all kinds of difficulties, should never have been inferior to themselves at any moment, should have always exactly hit the mark. At 6 p.m., the patient took a purgative pill. We again proposed to him the decoction of bark. He took some arrowroot, 2 spoonfuls of jelly, and a little water. The 8th, very bad night. Pulse, without being feverish, was weak, quick, and irregular. Purgative pill. 9th, the emperor passed a tolerably good night. He took some tea, acidulated with citron juice, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, an ounce of decoction of bark with spirituous tincture of the same substance, and at daybreak he was seized with vomiting. Extreme prostration of strength. 10th, nothing very particular. The patient experienced continued nausea and rejected almost all the food he took. His strength more and more in the decline. Pulse 72. The emperor thought, however, that he felt better. The crisis is over, and I'm now fallen again into the same state in which I have been languishing for the last 8 months, very weak and no appetite. And then placed his hand on the right hypochondriac region. It is there, in the liver. Ah, doctor, to what a latitude they have consigned me. He hung down his head and remained motionless until the moment when the surgeon of the 20th, who had asked his permission to feel his liver, endeavored to persuade him that the organ he complained of was sound. He cast upon him a look which was assuredly not one of conviction, shook his head, appeared thoughtful for a moment, and said to him with a kind of sarcastic smile, "It is well, doctor. I'm obliged to you for the hope you endeavor to restore to me. Go." We both withdrew. 11th, during the night, vomitings had occurred. The repetition of these accidents became alarming, and I was very desirous of putting a stop to it, and proposed an anodyne antiemetical mixture. "Doctor," said he, "when I came into the room, your patient will henceforward obey medicine. He is resolved to take the remedies you prescribed." Then, looking at those of his servants who were standing round his bed, he added with a gentle smile, "Begin by physicking all those rascals, and physic yourself. You all stand in need of medicines," hoping to stimulate his amour propre. We all tasted the mixture. "Well, well," said he, "I will not be the only one who shall not dare to face a dose. Come, give it quickly." I presented the cup to him. He swiftly carried it to his mouth and swallowed its contents at one draught. Unfortunately, however, it produced very little effect. The vomiting continued and occurred 3 times between 5:30 and 7 a.m. At 11 o'clock, the emperor got out of bed and remained an hour in his armchair. He took a spoonful of distilled cinnamon water mixed with common water. 1 p.m., icy coldness at the lower extremities, which I endeavored to dispel by fomentations. "No," said he, "it is not there. It is in the stomach, in the liver, that the disease resides. You have no remedies against the burning heat which consumes me, no preparations, no medicines capable of slaking the fire that rages within me." Are not attempted once more to persuade him that the liver was sound. It must be so, since such is Hudson's decree. After the most violent efforts, another vomiting of glarious substances occurred, followed by hiccup. At 2 p.m., I administered a teaspoonful of antiemetic mixture, and at 5, the patient took some jelly. 9 p.m., usual purgative pill. The emperor complained for some time after having swallowed it that it inconvenienced him very much and produced in his stomach an intolerable sensation of heaviness, painful abdominal tension. 12th, the emperor passed a very restless night. At 3 and 4 in the morning, hilarious vomitings. His strength continues to decline. At 7 a.m., he took a little jelly with 3 spoonfuls of red wine, and in an hour afterwards, 2 more spoonfuls of jelly. 11 a.m., vomiting of thick, pituitous matter. The emperor took a little jelly. The emperor got up at 1 p.m. and was supported to his armchair, but in half an hour afterwards he experienced an icy coldness in the lower extremities and was obliged to get into bed again. The patient very much agitated the remainder of the day, and the short intervals of light sleep which he had were interrupted by a sensation of suffocation. At 8 p.m. the patient took with pleasure a few spoonfuls of rice cream. At 9 o'clock, another attack, fever, accompanied with icy coldness of the lower extremities and all the other symptoms with which these attacks are usually complicated. I endeavored to dispel it. Many thanks for your care, doctor. It is a labor lost. The assistance of medicine is unavailing. The hour has struck. My disease is mortal. Doctor or not, do not people sometimes die of debility? How is it possible to live with so little food? 13th night, extremely agitated, the rice cream eaten by Napoleon was thrown up by vomiting with large quantity of glarous matters. The prostration of strength goes on increasing. Violent oppression on the stomach. The patient took a little more jelly and a roasted apple. The emperor refused to continue to take the purgative pills. I endeavored to triumph over his repugnance and strongly urged him to overcome a slight feeling of disgust. Are they well wrapped up, well covered? Yes, sire. They will not poison my mouth. Your Majesty will not even perceive that they have any taste at all. Indeed, assuredly. Well then, you rogue, swallow them, said he to Marchand, who immediately obeyed, protesting that they were not at all disagreeable to take. I told you so. It is not true, doctor, that he required physicking, and that my pills will do him good. They cannot do harm. Give him more for my part. I shall not take any of them again. The English, added he jokingly, are ashamed to use them, but I am not so squeamish, and submit to necessity. At about noon, 2 successive glorious vomitings. At 1 p.m., the emperor got up, was supported to his armchair, and took the usual dose of tincture of bark. But in the course of half an hour, he was taken back to his bed. He then asked for a paper and an inkstand, and gave directions that he might not be disturbed in his apartment. Count Montsalon and Marchand were the only 2 persons who went in.